Good evening, and welcome to Nightmare Theater, an open book club for nightmares. This is episode 33, and tonight we're joined by Ghost Train, aka Slaughterhouse Stories. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So the way this works, if you're new, is you can feel free to send a nightmare in to theforgottengrove at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to read it on air next week or at the end of tonight's show if there's any time left. But we've got some nightmares from Reddit that we're going to jump right into. But not before I ask Ghost Train about his nightmares. So have you ever had, well, I assume you've had a nightmare, but there are actually people, believe it or not, who have not had a nightmare. But if you could relay to me maybe your scariest nightmare.
Well, I have two reoccurring nightmares. The first one, I can't remember that well, so I'll do that one first. But it's always like the one that wakes me up the fastest. It scares me a lot. And it's just, I guess I can't remember the situation, but it's some kind of like humanoid creature. It's almost like, what was that Stephen King one with the cat-looking people? You know what I'm talking about?
Is it literally called Cat?
No.
Sorry.
They were like psychic vampires, but they look human, and then they just their form changes, and that's what happens in my dream. It changes into something like monstrous, and it's just I wake up and then I go back to sleep, and it's right back in the same spot. So I have to like literally wake myself up, and then kind of get up and go do something just so I don't go back into it.
Okay. What happens with these cats?
It's just everything seems fine, and then once they make the switch, it's like I'm running, I'm off and running, I'm trying to get away, and they're just tracking me down, and like no matter where I go, I can't get away.
Interesting. And then what's your other?
My other one is I remember that one a bit more vividly, but it's like I live in Philadelphia, so we have like row houses. So if you go out your front door, you're looking at somebody else's house in front of you. So I'm coming out of a house, and then for some reason I'm viewing everything from like I'm looking down on everything, and I could see like a bus plowing through a line of houses, and planes are flying overhead and dropping bombs, and people are parachuting in. It's just like this whole like war apocalyptic scenario that just I get dropped into all of a sudden.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's another one of those ones where it's like, now I'm trying to get away. I'm gathering my kids up, and I'm, getting us to cars, and explosions are going off, and then same thing. If I wake myself up from it, if I go back to sleep right away, I go right back into it, in like the same spot, and it's just like, gotta get up and walk around and do something.
Do you have any idea what they mean?
No, I had a friend tell me that she said I should look them up, and I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but it's the two freakiest nightmares I have, and they've been reoccurring for like the last like 10, 15 years.
I would say like, forgive me for taking a crack at the second one, but I feel like that one's probably just about being concerned maybe for the safety of your family, that type of thing. Like imagining, the place where you live is suddenly being a war zone or something like that.
It could be.
The first one though, that's a little crazier. Liam in the chat says Animorphs. Is that what those cat things are? Is that the Stephen King book?
Yeah, I think that's what they're called, but like there's a name for them. Like anybody that can transform is called an animorph. But
okay.
I really wish I could remember the Stephen King thing now. I had it in my head before we started, and then it just went away.
Oh, fair enough. Anyway, let's get into some of these Reddit nightmares. I'm sure some people are watching, anxious to hear them. So, would you do the honor of reading the first nightmare?
My pleasure. This one is by Reddit user Bloody Chanel. I lost my long-deceased dog in an alternate dimension that I accidentally entered. So this one is super weird. It started off with my family moving into this mansion. We were just unpacking and painting rooms, etc. I went to drive to the store, but I ended up discovering some kind of portal that took me back to the same place, but in another dimension. I visited this other dimension twice in the dream. The first time I just came and went since I was busy. It was an identical world, but everything was kind of hazy, decrepit, and gravity seemed to be optional. You could choose to float or walk normally. People seemed to use floating only to reach things up high, or travel through holes in mansion structures. Everything was also very old and destroyed. The house looked the way we had. The house looked the way we had it, but the wallpaper was peeling. It had holes everywhere. The grounds were unkept, etc. There were also many people inhabiting it, but they didn't seem bothered by my presence and greeted me casually, but overall ignored me. The second time, I intentionally found the same portal, but decided to explore. It wasn't like a physical wormhole you could see. I pulled into a specific spot of one of the mansion's driveways to access it. This time, the people seemed intrigued by my presence. At this point, I'd somehow realized that my dog had followed me into the dimension, but I couldn't find him. When I went to look for him inside the ruins of the mansion, suddenly there were 100 dogs nearly identical to him, but different enough that I could distinguish him. He was also blind and deaf, so he was very difficult to find, since he couldn't respond to his name or see me. A young woman, maybe slightly younger than me, became friends with me and helped me find my dog. She had platinum hair and a really puffy hairstyle, something you'd have seen in the 80s or early 90s. Once we found my dog, it got sketchy, which, for more context, is super odd, because it wasn't the dog I currently have. This is our beagle named Piper, who had passed away 13 years ago. He was in ancient, blind, and deaf stage of life, like he was in the final years, which was somehow a red flag to these people. When I found him, he was scared to death, hiding under a wooden patio deck. Again, he couldn't see or hear me, but he didn't seem to recognize my scent either. I pulled him out and held him close, but he was biting me. I wasn't injured by his teeth, though. I couldn't even feel it. The woman began to guide me out of the mansion, warning me not to speak to anyone and to just leave quickly. She gave me a makeshift leash and directed me to her favorite way out, as she referred to the portal. I told her my car was in a driveway, so I'd rather use that one, as to not leave it behind. As we walked around the back of the mansion in my car, she said something like, "Oh no," as she looked behind us. I looked as well. There was a man peeking over a fence behind us. He followed us and said to me, "So she's labored then." I think he was referring to my dog. She ushered me hurriedly away without saying anything to the man. Once my car was in sight, she gave me a gentle nudge, told me to go, and vanished. I made a dash for my car, but it wasn't my car anymore. It was a literal tricycle, but it had a throttle as if it had a small invisible engine on it. By the time I got to it, I was surrounded by people who were very silent and soft-spoken, but obviously didn't want me to leave. Two of them, who appeared to be my mother and teenage son, approached to grab the tricycle from under me. None of them ever addressed me. They just murmured to each other. I hit the throttle, since the woman's hand was on the tire, and I thought it would make her let go. She was alarmed by the sensation, but the tire moving rapidly didn't harm her. Someone also was holding me from the back now, so the front tire was just free spinning as the mother and son began to stick their hands in and out of curiosity, mumbling stuff that I couldn't understand to each other. I woke up about that point. I never got to understand why they wanted me to stay, but the young woman wanted me to leave, or why my dog hasn't been above ground in over a decade was there. My car turning into something small and useless on the road like a tricycle isn't new to me. I don't understand it, but it's a reoccurring element in my nightmares.
Interesting.
That one's weird.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I had a couple thoughts about, first of all, I feel like it's pretty simply about the person's dog and them being concerned for their dog, right? And like, I think they even mentioned that their dog's like deaf and blind, right?
Yeah, deaf and blind.
So yeah, I feel like I'd probably worry a lot about a dog like that as well. I'd say that the element that they mentioned towards the end about how their cars turn into tricycles, I feel like this is kind of, I would interpret this as like a very unique form of helplessness. Like it's sort of like you're being like forcefully reverted to childhood, or you're being thrust into some reduced like state of competency, I guess. Yeah, but that's just kind of a really like interesting manifestation of it. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was right at the beginning when I think that they mentioned how their they're in a mansion or they're in a house that looks just like the inside of their house, but the wallpaper is dilapidated and falling apart, and things just seem rotten and off and weird. Like it's sort of like, what's it called in Stranger Things? Like the other world or whatever, something like that.
The Upside Down.
The Upside Down, yeah. Like I've had actually quite a few nightmares like that. Like, and wherever I go, like whenever I'm living somewhere for long enough, I'll have like, in my mom's house, I would have these recurring nightmares where I would awake in the basement and everything was yellowed and rotten and the walls were falling apart and there's just some like disgusting like mattress on the floor for some reason and all the furniture was gone. Like that type of thing. And I've had that here twice now, a recurring nightmare like of the apartment that I'm in, and just imagining like all these like bugs skittering around and just things being nasty. And I wonder what these nightmares mean. You ever had one like that?
Nothing like that, where I felt like I was like in the Upside Down, like Stranger Things. But it is weird that she would have the sensation of someone like her mother and her teenage son, like stopping her from leaving, and all these other people holding her back. So it's almost like she feels like she's been held back by parents and by children, and she's just stuck in this broken down kind of life.
I like that angle. Interesting. I'm going to now read a nightmare from a Reddit user named Digital Variant. The post is called "I'm never gonna sleep after hearing that specific scream again." The post reads, "I dreamed about this old footage. Please read it. It's not the ordinary creepypasta. I felt sleepy in the dream. Just for context, there were 2 teens on it. The tape was edited 1990s, and it said on plain white text that the other teen was about to do something that will completely disturb the world. Unfortunately, I forgot that part. The next part is they start walking around this logging forest, wood logs and processing, etc. But outside, the teen holding the camera was tall, but they still managed to lose each other. The teen holding the camera stopped talking because he couldn't find his friend. He searched everywhere because he wasn't ready on what was about to happen. This part will traumatize me until the end. Silence in the tape for some seconds. Then it cuts to this picture with 2 logs on it and 2 bushes. It was still a picture, nothing wrong with it, and you can hear the other teens screaming on top of their lungs. And the scream is different. It's almost like a girl's scream, but it's deep fried. It's not a scared scream, but it was a scream of someone who overdosed on drugs or adrenaline. The scream sounded like he was screaming in joy while stabbing himself, running around. Because I was half asleep in the dream, I didn't notice or hear the scream at first, but when my family got awakened by it, and they asked me to turn it down, there it was. Screams of hyperness, joy. I never knew what they were doing. Looking into that picture while screams go through me, it's just another level. I wake up, crying of fear. I usually never wake up to a nightmare, but yeah, it shook me enough within 6 hours of sleep. I'm never going to be able to sleep anymore. I'm going to try recreating the screams, as well as the picture it had whilst doing it. Also, those teens were Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic. I have to say, I don't know who Chris...
That's strange.
Yeah, I mean, you got Blair Witch vibes from the beginning, I assume. I certainly did.
Definitely.
Yeah. I actually don't know what an overdose scream sounds like. You have any idea what he's talking about?
I have no idea what that would be.
Yeah.
An overdose scream. I don't know. I mean, most people that overdose are like lethargic.
Mm-hmm. And he specifically mentioned that it was not scared. So I was imagining that it was going to be like a scream of rage or something more terrifying. But yeah, it would be interesting to see him recreate it, as he mentioned that he would do.
Yeah, I guess maybe like if you're overdosing on drugs, maybe it's just like a scream of pure ecstasy and joy. You know, I guess a happy scream. Like, I guess if you're like at a concert and like the band's playing your favorite song, that kind of scream, maybe.
Okay. Sorry for the sirens going on in the background here.
Happened to you last weekend too, or last week too.
I unfortunately, no matter where I live, it's always right beside a fire station. So, yeah, I never plan for that, and then there it is. Anyway, would you like to read dream number 3?
Yes, by Reddit user Sour Cream X. This thread is titled "American Girl Baby Dolls Are Creepy AF." A few years ago, I had an American Girl baby doll, or doll baby, that I never thought was creepy until I had this nightmare. I was in bed, and I woke up to my... Oh, what is that? American Girl doll baby on my bed. Next day I tell one of my friends about it, and he comes to my house and checks my room. We see nothing until I get possessed by the doll, and slam the bedroom door on his fingers. They come off, and fast forward to bed again. I feel creeped out and go to my parents' door. I knock a few times with no reply, so I open the door to find their room is empty. I run to my brother's room and find that it is also empty. There is literally nothing in the house except for my room. The dog is also gone. I ran to the front door, but it was locked, and I started to panic as I ran to the garage door that was also locked. I turned around to see the American Girl doll baby standing behind me with a knife, and I woke up. This dream still scares me to this day.
I actually think I have something about this. Yeah, evil dolls. So this is from the internet. Evil dolls in a nightmare represent your childhood or past. An evil doll represents that you had a dark childhood or past that you need to heal from. That was one thing I got from the internet. And then another possibility is that a doll in a nightmare can represent some feeling of isolation or loneliness. Now, I'm going to add like a third possible interpretation to that, which is just the fact that dolls are super creepy. I agree with this, just the title, like dolls are creepy as fuck. Like sometimes you don't really need to complicate things with like super deep interpretation, but maybe they just watched Annabelle or something.
It's like, oh, well, it could be this. No, dolls are fucking scary.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. I don't know about so I'm allowed to curse, sorry.
Yeah, I do it sometimes and sometimes I don't. I don't worry about it too much. Yeah, but it really could just be that simple. I might just hop.
Dolls and clowns seem to be like the two things that always get people.
Yeah. I wonder why like clowns were even invented. Like who had the idea to just put face paint on? And I'm sure there's some rich history on that, like that I'm insulting some super deep clown enthusiasts, and there's a pretty big Wikipedia page probably.
It's probably like 3,000 years ago in ancient Greece, some murderer decided to put face paint on.
Yeah, exactly. Some murderer. Yeah, well said. Anyway, this is a post by a user named Nate Macaulay. The post is titled, "About to fall asleep. Feeling a drowning feeling, knowing I'm falling into a nightmare." The post reads, "I have this weird thing that's kind of hard to explain. Basically, when I'm about to fall asleep, like a minute before I fall asleep, I suddenly feel a drowning feeling, and I just know that I just know that it's going to be a nightmare. So I urge myself awake. I force my eyes open, and it's a really weird feeling. It's so hard pulling out of sleep seconds before you fall asleep, so it's really difficult. And for some reason, I just know I'm going to have a nightmare. And honestly, I can't tell if this experience is the nightmare. This doesn't happen super often, but one night, or a couple days, weeks ago, it just kept happening every time I was about to fall asleep, which is pretty annoying because every time I have to pull out of falling asleep, which sucks. So yeah, I was wondering if anyone else gets this too or knows what it is." So I chose to include this one even though it's not really a nightmare, just because first of all, I think that what they're experiencing is something called hypnic jerk, which is a phenomenon that normally you would experience as falling rather than drowning. So like you're about to, you've had that before?
Yeah, I remember reading about what that was, and I was like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've never had it as drowning personally, and that is interesting also, the way like they experience the sensation of drowning and then it always becomes a nightmare. For me, like the hypnic jerk comes in either one of two forms. The most common is falling, and then the other one that I get is literally like right as I'm on the precipice of falling asleep. I just see this like deformed demonic face like appear right in front of me, like a foot away from me, and then it just like you just jolt awake again.
Oh, just give me a nice sleep. Boo. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, and I'm actually not. I don't recall what it is. I think I wrote it down somewhere at some point, but I know that it has something to do with your inner ear, like some like fluid moving in your inner ear, like at the exact moment that you're falling asleep or something like that. And basically, it's. I think that you're just also on the precipice of entering the hypnagogic state, so you're like half awake and half asleep, which means that any hallucination goes. Now, the one other thing that I'd like to add to this is just the fact that it's drowning, and maybe to interpret it as a nightmare, even though it's not one necessarily. But nightmares about drowning, according to the internet, are thought to indicate that you're overwhelmed with emotion or you're repressing desires or thoughts. So it could just be like when he mentions that, or she, I'm not sure, when they mentioned that a week ago that they were on the they kept experiencing this night after night. It could be that they were going through some like rough time emotionally or something like that.
That's what I was going to say. They're probably drowning in their own darkness, and it's manifesting itself as a nightmare.
Here's an interesting one in the chat from Liam. Lately, I've been getting a dream / hypnic jerk that I'm hit in the face with a volleyball right as I'm falling asleep and jolt awake with large bodily motions. Interesting.
What a sensation. There's actually one thing I'd read about the hypnic jerk was that it's actually your body or your mind making sure you're still alive.
Really?
Yeah, I'd read that a few years ago, that it's like your mind's way of saying, hey, like,
You
'cause when
good?
you're sleeping, it kind of mimics death a little bit.
Okay.
And then like your mind's just like, hey, huh? What? Okay, I was just making sure you were still there.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm actually curious now, like if anyone else has had any unique hypnic jerk in the chat, or if you've had like any of the common ones, like falling. Yeah.
Yeah, mine's always falling.
It's a weird phenomenon. But would you like to read Nightmare 5?
This one is by Cyclone7827, and it's called My Worst Nightmare. I had a really bad nightmare just last night. It first started like I was playing Minecraft in VR, mining of course, and then when I was mining back up, there were a ton of spiders, which actually felt like real tarantulas. And then I reached a room and I ran out of blocks, and then my pickaxe broke. This is when the dream drifted away from Minecraft. There was jaws coming out of holes in the walls trying to eat me. Somehow I dodged all of them, and then ended up in another room with a massive filing cabinet. It was very dark, and I heard footsteps coming my way. I climbed on top of the filing cabinet. There was a monster trying to come atop the cabinet with me, and it had these terrifying claws with blood on them. And I realized there were bruises on the claws, so I punched all of the bruises as hard as I could, and the monster fell to the ground, licking its claws. And I tipped over the filing cabinet and killed it. This was extremely realistic, and there was so much gore and blood on the ground, I could hardly look at it. Then a monster that looked like an old lady came in, which looked something like Terrence from the Roblox game It Lurks. And it looked at the monster I killed on the floor and said in the most demonic voice I'd ever heard, "You killed my daughter. Now I will kill you." The monster lunged at me, and I started running away from it into all these different rooms. And then I saw prisons with these mutilated-looking monsters in them. And the monster that was chasing me pressed a button and let them out. Eventually I made a wrong turn and got to a dead end. I sat on the floor as quiet as possible, hoping the monster wouldn't know where I was, but the monsters found me. I fought one of them and killed it, but another monster stabbed me, and I felt real pain. Eventually I sat on the floor crying as they stood back and covered their face with their long clawed hands, and said, "Our comrade has fallen, and now so will you." And they jump scared me, and everything went to black. To make it worse, I felt this weird pain that felt like tickling and stabbing at the same time, like the sound of chewing flesh. What a weird dream.
Yeah, it almost seems like something that you have when you've been consuming too much horror media. And even the way he describes his fear, I was jump scared. You know, this is like a term that you use when you're playing horror games a lot. I know Minecraft isn't a horror game, but it can be scary.
It can be, yeah.
The vibes sometimes that it has. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I could look at the dream chart for fun because I know spiders is on there. So a nightmare about spiders, if the focus is on the spider itself rather than its webs, that's the one that we're concerned with. That means that you feel like an outsider, you're trying to stay away from something. I honestly don't think that this applies in this case. I wouldn't trust the nightmare interpretation chart. I feel like it's just consuming too much scary media, essentially.
Yeah, that sounds like, something that would happen to my kids when they played Five Nights at Freddy's too much or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one that I don't know how people play that game. Like, it's literally just jump scare.
Yeah, F that game.
Yeah, I don't know how people enjoy that, but yeah. In the chat, Autumn says, I always have the falling hypnic jerk. And so does L. So yeah, a lot of people have had the falling. Interesting. Now I will read Nightmare 6. So this is a post by a user named MavicKM. The post is titled, 2 Recent Dreams About Comas. The post reads, in the span of like a week, I've had 2 dreams in which I was in a coma, both unpleasant. In the first, something happened, I suppose a car accident, and I fall into a coma. My guess is I was in the coma for years, because I remember walking from it and seeing everything very different and my mom being dead. This was a while ago, so I kind of forgot it, but I still remember, and now I just woke up from a second coma dream. Once again, something happened, not exactly sure what, but maybe an accident in school. After waking from the coma, my guess would be that it was a 6 to 12 month coma. However, I felt out of place and like I missed out on so much. I tried to stay accustomed to everything in school, but found many of my friends gone, or even one that was apparently dead, was told in the dream by a teacher. Anyway, there was still someone left that I wanted to talk to, so I asked her if we could talk in private. I was in a very sad and left out mood, however, and the dream ended there, and I woke up. Please, it doesn't feel right having these dreams so soon after one another. Can anyone tell me what they mean? Well...
Oh, coma dreams.
Mm-hmm. You ever had a coma dream?
No, I mean, it just seems so weird because, people can have nightmares when they're in a coma, so it'd be weird to have a nightmare about being in a coma.
Mm-hmm. But I think I know what this is about, actually. I'm going to take a crack at this because the nightmare isn't really about them being in a coma because they're not like visualizing themselves. It's about what they experience when they come out of the coma, which is like they're basically like, it feels like they're missing out on important events in their life due to the passage of time. And so I think that's probably what the nightmare is about. I think that they feel like for whatever reason maybe they didn't make the most of a certain grade that they were in, or like a situation that they were in school, and like they maybe just like they feel like their life is passing them by too quickly.
That makes sense. Like the sensation of FOMO is like manifesting itself in their dreams.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's interesting that I was reminded of something is the fact that they had the dream the first time. And they remember that it happened the first time, but only after having it recur. And I've experienced this with nightmares as well, where I have a nightmare. I know that I've had it before. It's almost like deja vu, but I don't remember that I've had it before until I have it a second time. And that's actually the case with this one I was just mentioning, like this apartment that I'm currently in, rotting. And I had a nightmare like this, and I remember in the first nightmare, I was just like making a salad out of these like wilted leaves, and there were bugs in it, and it was dark, and like the lights were off, and I couldn't really, like I could barely see, and there's just bugs crawling everywhere, and everything's falling apart. And I didn't remember that nightmare right after I had it, but then I had this second nightmare where I woke up into the same version, the same like twisted version of this apartment, and in this nightmare, I walked into the spot where I'm sitting right now in front of this desk, and there was a person there, and they were invisible, but I couldn't actually see them. I just bumped into them, and I felt them, and they were like warm to the touch. And I thought, for some reason in the nightmare, I knew it was me, but it was like a fractured piece of my soul, or something like that.
Jeez.
Yeah, and I put that in a story I wrote called Erebus, God of Darkness, like that I put out recently. But yeah, so I can relate to this sensation of when you experience a nightmare that you know you've had before for the second time and remember it. That's a really freaky feeling.
Yeah, that's like what I deal with my recurring nightmares. It's like, even in the dream, I'm like, no, not again. But it's like, I can't get out until a certain point. So it's like, even when I know, like, oh, I know it's about to happen, it's like, yeah, but you're stuck.
Oh yeah, you just have like the lucidity, I guess, just still trapping you there in it. Interesting. Would you like to read Nightmare 7?
Yes, by Reddit user ThenCalligrapher8, called Nightly Dream. Every single night I have a variation of the same dream. I start out running around, knowing somebody is looking for me, trying to hurt me. I find a gun eventually after searching top and bottom. I put it in my pocket. At this point in the dream, I begin going through what I would call an obstacle course from hell. It's really high up. The paths are thin with no rails, and there's lots of small spaces that I have to squeeze through. These small spaces are inside of the structure I'm in, and they can be anything from a narrow staircase to a space where I have to go underwater in order to get to the other side. It is extremely claustrophobic. Once I get out of this weird course, I see the people who are looking to hurt me. This part of the dream gets hazy because I don't remember all of it, but it changes pretty much every night. But basically, I use the gun I found in my dream. Sometimes I hurt the person, sometimes I just scare them and run away. When I end up hurting them, it is always very disturbing and realistic. Now the police are looking for me. They come to my house and surround it, waiting for me. Usually at this point in the dream I wake myself up, but there are a few variations where the dream will keep going. I run from the police and usually get on a plane. The plane then proceeds to crash and throw me through the air. Once I hit the ground I feel the pain, and I know I'm dead. Also, sometimes it's not a plane. A lot of times the dream is in this sort of dark, creepy version of Disney World, and I'll be thrown off a ride, where the ride will have a horribly claustrophobic part to it, and it just scares the hell out of me. Also, every now and then, the people will catch me, and they will stab me to death. I feel every stab as if it's real life. These dreams are so vivid that I cannot tell what is real life and what is a dream. I often pinch myself during the day to make sure I'm not dreaming. It's so vivid that every bit of pain I feel is real. The terrifying, traumatizing feeling during these dreams is all too real. I'd like to go through a traumatic situation every single night. And I mean every single night. Thank you for reading.
That's brutal.
Wow.
Every single night. Wow. I mean, that could even be like nightmare disorder. Like if you're having them literally that frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like especially if you're having them multiple times in one night, although it's not said that that's what's happening. You have any thoughts on what this one means?
I mean, there's a lot to this one because it's, at first I was thinking it's just maybe they don't realize how claustrophobic they really are. So it's just this, but then there's these people chasing them, and then there's the police are looking for them, and then there's a plane, and now it's Disney World. There's so much to this dream, and the fact that they can feel all the landing or the stabbing is just, it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, I definitely also picked up on the claustrophobic side of things, which makes sense, right? Because they have the phobia that they're aware of. But the other theme that I actually felt really strong in this dream was a feeling of guilt. The fact that they'll sometimes hurt someone, and then, basically, like, they have a scenario that plays out where they're being chased by the police, or it feels like they, are, like, running from some mistake. So, I mean, in order to like maybe try to help them, what I would suggest is maybe identify, well, first of all, try to get treated for the claustrophobia, although I have that too. Like I just don't look at things that make me feel claustrophobic, and I don't put myself in claustrophobic situations. So like I avoid it. It's not as intense as they have it, but yeah, like, and then the other thought is like maybe look through for something that you've done in the waking world that's making you feel guilty, and then forgive yourself for that. I don't know what's going on outside my window, but it sounds like there's a lot of bangs. Someone doing something to feel guilty for later.
It's the aliens from that Starlink satellite finally landing.
Oh yeah. But yeah, hope that they got something out of that. All right, and I've got another super long one. I think it's my turn, right? Did you just read? Okay, cool. So this is a post by a user named KMSelfs. Oh, it's probably KMSelfs. The post is titled, "I was seeing the same monster in my dreams at night. Does this mean anything?" The post reads, "As a child, maybe beginning at age 9 or 10, I had a dream one night. It went something like this. I had been walking down the hallway of my house in complete darkness and could hear somewhat of a jingle sang by children echoing in and out. As I kept walking down the hall, I started noticing handprints appearing on the wall. They were illuminating colorful colors and soon began spiraling around the hallway. I got scared and began running down the hall, running into my room. She seemed running into my mom. She seemed pretty spooked as well, because the logic in dreams doesn't exist. Me and her somehow managed to both hide under the dining room chairs. That's when we noticed a set of feet walking by, back and forth. And then, as expected, a face bent down that looked right at us. The best way I can explain this figure is by imagining the Grinch, except all black with red eyes. As soon as I seen him, I woke up. Little did I know this would be the last time I had seen him. If a day went by, and where I ever thought of him, he would appear that night in my dreams, tormenting me. Sometimes I even had dreams with him, where I had to trick myself that I woke up, only for me to be stuck in a dream thinking I was awake, and he would come back again for me. These dreams made me extremely scared of sleeping. I was terrified of even thinking of him because I was scared of running into him again in my sleep. However, one night I had a dream with him, except this time he didn't torment me, didn't chase me, didn't hurt me, but rather began speaking to me. It was the first time I had heard his voice, which was actually very calming, and he simply had apologized to me and said he was sorry for scaring me and that he wanted to become friends with me. I of course agreed to it, and soon I woke up from that dream. Ever since then, I have never dreamt of him again, no matter how hard I think of him. I'm currently 21 years old and still think about him from time to time, and I just can't explain it. Do you guys think it's odd that this figure in my dreams was able to completely remove himself from my life? I wish sometimes to see him once more, to get any sort of answers as to why or how he found me and targeted me." And then this is actually a follow-up to that post. "So me and my high school friend both have a serious fascination of horror as well, as I got him into it, and we've experienced many unexplained things throughout our friendship. One of our favorite things to do was drive his dad's old golf cart down a pitch-black neighborhood at night and tell our scary experiences to each other. It was probably one of our favorite things to do. One night, my sister had joined us, as she had nothing else to do and wanted to hear some of our experiences, and after a few stories back and forth, we asked her if she had any to tell, and well, this is where it got very creepy. She began telling us a story from her childhood, in which she had a bad dream when she was younger. As she began telling her story to me and my friend, we looked at each other, and literal chills went down my body, and we just kind of sat there with our mouths opened. She had been telling us the exact same nightmare I had as a child. The only difference being hers had a different version of the monster in it. She described hers as a man with orange spikes running down his body. Obviously, me and my friend began freaking out, which had caused her to freak out as well, and we explained to her what had happened, and she got scared as well. To this day, I still don't understand how this could have happened. I don't know if perhaps I had told her this story before, and it subconsciously went into her head as her own dream. But she got every detail of it right, which scared me the most.
Jeez.
Yeah. The description of the monster, certainly from his point of view, just it being a dark figure with red eyes, that is very sleep paralysis demon-y.
Yeah.
Like it's very common, but it doesn't sound like it was actual sleep paralysis. Except in the beginning. No, even in the beginning, no, because he's running through different rooms of his house before he even sees it.
I mean, I already didn't like it because there was children. I have a friend who can, she sees shadow people, and she's always talking about children ghosts and how something like doesn't sit right with them. So they started mentioning children and appearing handprints, and I'm just like, nope.
I mean, the monsters weren't children, though, right?
No, the monsters weren't, but that definitely sounds like a shadow person, or his at least. I don't know about the sisters, but his was definitely sounded like a shadow person.
Mm-hmm. And you hear these stories about how children are supposed to be more attuned to these supernatural things. And I wonder, like maybe they are seeing different versions of the same thing in their house, depending on what you choose to believe, I guess.
It kind of reminds me of, I've read a children's book. It was called The Monster He Came to Live Under the Bed. It just came out recently, and it was like you got a monster that was assigned to you, and like the kid, like in this dream scenario where it's like, no, they're very scared, and it's like, oh, it turns out the monster actually wants to be your friend. Oh. So it's very weird that nightmare would match up with that kind of a book. Oh, yeah. Weird synchronicity there, but that's what it reminded me of, with the same exact dream, but just a different monster. It's like, well, yeah, this was the monster that was hired for you.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I actually had forgotten about that part, how the monster kind of comes back to him at like later in his life and is like, hey, sorry for scaring you. I wonder then if it like represents like the darkness or something, like fear of the darkness, which maybe like he grew out of, and that could be like symbolic. Who knows? Anyway, that was a really good nightmare.
Or he could just be haunted.
Yeah, or you're haunted.
Get out. Get out of there.
Sorry, buddy. Hire an exorcist. Or hire someone. You need help. Anyway, I enjoyed that nightmare a lot. That was really freaky.
Yeah, that one was cool. Like, it had all sorts of like scary moments in it. Anyone would be like, nope, I'm out. But to have them all together, whew.
Yeah.
And then to have like your sister like having the same nightmare with just a different monster. Whew.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to read nightmare number 9?
Yes. This one's by Autumn Leaves 194, and it's called It's a Small World After All, Disney Ride Kind of Nightmare. The post says, I usually don't have nightmares often, but when I do, they're usually not that scary, as in I can forget about it. These past couple of months, I've been having a nightmare once a week. I think it may be due to the death of a loved one. I'm not sure. The one that's scaring me the most is the one that happened last night, and I bolted out of my bed screaming. So it starts off like I'm riding the It's a Small World ride at Disney World. Like it's a slow boat ride going through my hometown, like dark, eerie places there. The first place I'm going through is this long road near my childhood home that's got forests on both sides, and looks like werewolves might jump out. Then it shoots me back to the driveway of my childhood home, and in front there's an apple tree with tall grass. It starts to fog, and there's this figure with scary eyes staring at me, smiling. I try to get myself to move, but I can't. I then hear familiar voices saying, she can't move, so sad, can't move. I remember feeling fear like I've never felt before. Soon I felt like this figure was getting closer to me, and see out of the corner of my eye is the person that passed away, like a choppy, blurred version of her. I yelled for her to stay away and kept saying, no, stay away. I then tell myself to move, and when I finally do, the figure lunges at me. And I wake up, bolted out of my bed into the bathroom, like I was literally running. The nightmare kept me up for a couple of hours, because I just couldn't calm down. Anyone have dreams like this? What the hell could this mean? That seems like a weird, like trauma-based dream.
Yeah, I have done some reading on seeing a dead person that you know indicates that you're struggling with grief generally. If you do know the person, it could just be anxiety about an illness that you're experiencing or something like that. And then seeing someone who's still alive as a dead person could mean that you feel guilty about some aspect of your relationship with them. But I think in this case it's saying that it is someone who really did die in real life. So it could be a sensation of guilt. Did he mention how close that? Yeah, death of a loved one. Okay.
Yeah, I almost feel like maybe that loved one was like a protective figure to them, and that's why, or someone that they wanted to protect, and that's why they had this figure that they were trying to tell them to stay away from, or the figure that was encroaching on them now that the loved one was gone. Like kind of like a fear of not having that person anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually really like that interpretation. I would like to get into the next one, nightmare number 10. I think this is me. So this is a post by Lucas Yapi. The post is titled, "Google is ending you now." The post reads, "My dreams and nightmares normally don't have fantasy things, like demons or magical lands, so it's kind of difficult for me to notice that it's not a real thing. Yesterday, I had this nightmare about a Google algorithm in YouTube. It started with me watching some Disney videos. I remember the thumbnail being something related to the Goof Troop, and then some title, YouTube's search bar algorithm, showed to me in the recommendations. I clicked the video, and it was pretty much an average YouTube video about a guy explaining things. He was saying about a secret algorithm called search bar algorithm. It consists of YouTube predicting what will be the most relevant result for you to click whenever you search something in the search bar, and show this result according to the position of your cursor. For example, if you search funny cat videos and you usually put your cursor a little bit above the middle of the screen, the best result will show to you in the location based on some kind of crowd search engine. As weird as it sounds, it started to make sense to me, even more because I read it once that Google knows the pattern of your cursor movement, and with that can identify you as a human being and let you pass the "I'm not a robot" CAPTCHA without completing that annoying minigame. But it all went wrong when the guy started talking about some failure in the algorithm, and if you search for Google in the ending you know, or ending you now, I think it's supposed to say Google is ending you now, only that will be in your results repeatedly, both search bar and video results. The video ended with the guy saying that the video was too disturbing to show and that he'll be demonetized if he decides to go, so I clicked off the video. The video was just a blue abstract background with the sound of really disturbing frequencies. The description said it was a binaural sound. It started creeping me out so much that I closed the video and suddenly woke up realizing it was a dream. Quickly, I grabbed my phone and searched something similar to that on YouTube, but no results were found.
It could be like a fear of like technology almost, with the Google ending you and having to test if you're a robot or not, all that stuff.
I was actually thinking it could be a fear of how like Google's like listening to you constantly.
Yeah.
Because he's mentioning how like it knows where your cursor is, and the other actually vibe I got from it is, I don't know if you've ever heard, you might have even done a video about it. This like phenomenon that you hear, like these different radio stations that broadcast numbers and just kind of strange patterns. I've seen this for like YouTube videos as well. There are these YouTube channels that it's just like a series of numbers, and they just play these like they have like these like 7-second videos or whatever, and it will just be some footage of some strange like office room or something, and there's some like people believe that there's like a coded message embedded in both the radio stations and these videos, and they just go through these to like insane levels of detail trying to analyze it. I kind of got this vibe from this nightmare as well. Just seeing how they.
Yeah, it does sound like the whole because a lot of those get like the spy feel, like, oh, it's obviously it's like Russians or whoever's spying on us, and they're sending out these coded messages through the radio waves.
Hmm. Yeah, like just with the disturbing frequencies at the end that he mentions in the binaural sound, and you're not really sure. Like maybe this video has the potential to like hack my brain or something. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's true though. Like Google's always listening, and the Amazon's always listening, and the phone's always listening. It's terrifying if you really think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we just have to, I guess, put our trust in it at this point. But
If not, it'll kill us.
yeah. Would you like to read Nightmare 11?
This one's by Reddit user Nico1325, called "Shot to Death in a Dream." Again, the post reads: "We had just gotten back from the store. We bought toys, beach supplies, snacks, drinks. It was sunny and warm out. My sister was helping me unpack the car, while my brothers ran and played Nerf guns in the bushes. My parents stood off to the side, chatting. Then 2 cops burst out of the bushes, yelling at us to freeze and drop the gun and such. My brothers dropped their Nerf toys. My sister and parents put their hands up, but I couldn't stop moving forward for some reason. My sister finally hissed at me, 'Kenzie,' and finally I snapped out of it and put my hands up, still holding grocery bags in them. 3 good seconds passed with no motion and no aggression, and then the cop fired. It hit me just below my chest and ripped out the other side. I felt warm, achy and warm and heavy and dizzy. I fell on the ground. My family started screaming. I touched the sticky wound a bit before losing my strength and slowly losing consciousness. Nothing in that dream was far-fetched in any way. We were just going to go play at the park. We were just going to go play."
I mean, sounds like kind
So,
of a
Yeah.
obvious interpretation, a bit like in terms of just being afraid of guns or things of that nature. But the other aspect that I kind of wanted to mention was the fact that they move forward and they can't stop themselves for any reason. So this is actually like something that you see in quite a few nightmares. And like normally, like it's basically like you can refer to it as like your body moving on its own. So there could be like a physical manifestation for why this is happening in a nightmare. Like you could be literally on marionette strings, and in other cases it's your brain just or some invisible force pulling you, something like that. And things like this in a nightmare indicate that a couple things. One, you're not living the life the way you want, or you're behaving in a way that's not like how you would in the real world. So that's why in order for the nightmare to like justify you behaving that way, it has to sort of force you to move that way. And then the other thing, which I feel like could maybe play more of a role here, is that your subconscious is trying to justify showing you something that it knows you wouldn't look at without being forced to do so. Kind of an interesting concept.
It is interesting. It also depends, not to get too deep into this part of it, but it also depends on the race of the dreamer. If it's a brown-skinned person, it could just speak to their fear of being innocently shot down by police. But if the user's white, it could just speak to maybe they're one of those people that don't really understand the struggle, and now all of a sudden their mind is trying to make them understand what that's like to be shot when you're innocent.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think this is my turn, sorry. So Nightmare 12 is a post by a user named Crushed Glaze. The post is titled "Physical Pain from Nightmare Attack." The post reads, "I just experienced one of the worst dreams I've ever had. My father-in-law had been going through some less than stellar personality changes in real life due to being in constant pain. And unfortunately, he was the aggressor in my nightmare last night. He was yelling at me and blaming me for not providing some urgent information in the middle of the night, and I was telling him that if he needed it urgently, he should have woken me up. But since I was sleeping and didn't know he needed the information, he can't blame me. It devolved into a screaming match, and I went up the staircase and yelled, 'Go fuck yourself.' Quick as a flash, he ran up the stairs and got between me and the landing, where my spouse was standing, and my father-in-law proceeded to try to bodily push me down the stairs. I was in disbelief, but I managed to wrap my hands around the banister and my legs around his torso so that if I went down, he would come with me. And I yelled to my spouse that my father-in-law just tried to push me down the stairs, but they did nothing but stare at me. With my legs pulled up around his waist, there was a gap between the bottom of my shirt and the waistband of my pants, exposing my lower back, and my father-in-law began scratching and scraping the skin on my lower back with his nails, resulting in extreme physical pain. But I couldn't let go of the banister to stop him, because he was trying to throw me down the stairs. He kept scratching and scratching until I could feel blood welling up, and I was screaming for him to stop or for my partner to help, but my father-in-law kept scraping and my partner just stared. Finally, I was jolted awake, sobbing uncontrollably, and the pain in my lower back lingered for a few minutes. I had to rub the spots to soothe the nerves there. It was hands down the worst experience I've ever had, and I'm having trouble not being afraid of my father-in-law right now.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. I mean, I think that they are very aware, like as they mentioned, that like there's just a bit of tension, I guess, in the extended family right now that they feel with their father-in-law. But I think probably the most interesting like thing that maybe they weren't aware of, and well, maybe they were as well, it's the fact that the partner's just standing there, right?
Yeah, like the one that's supposed to protect you from harm is just standing there and looking at you like it's your fault or not caring what happens to you.
It seems to be like a fear that maybe that they have in their subconscious that their partner like won't have their back or won't take their side in that situation, if that ever were to play out, although unlikely to play out that dramatically in any case.
Yeah, but almost like the partner's really close with the father-in-law, and it's like it feels like there's some underlying real life tension.
But yeah, I'm curious to know if they're even aware that they have this fear of the spouse not being on their side, or whether their subconscious is trying to show that to them. That's like the interesting thing about nightmares is they can unveil fears of certain situations that are kind of more nuanced than you would even expect.
I mean, it's certainly possible that like maybe there's not like an actual real life attachment, like experience, but maybe it's like there is some kind of thing they disagree with their father-in-law on, and they're just so afraid to bring it up because they don't know if their spouse would defend them or be on their side, and they don't. So they're just holding it inside, and so now it's manifesting itself in this nightmare, where it becomes like physically abusive from the father-in-law.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Would you like to read Nightmare 13?
This one is by Embarrassed Face 6334, and it's called Repetitive Nightmare. It says, when I was around 3 or 4, not sure, I started getting this dream I would get every year right around the same time. It was almost the exact same time, but every time they had a different ending. When it ended, I'd either end in me dying or this random lady dying. I'll get to her when explaining. But since at least 2 years ago, I haven't had it since. Anytime I got this, I'd wake up around 4 a.m. This dream felt so realistic, so now I'll get into it. So first, it would always start at this place my family took me for the 4th of July at my cottage. We'd be watching fireworks until something happened to someone in my family. In this case, mostly my mother. It was strange, and I had no clue what had happened, so I'd constantly look around for her in panic. It's basically like I was on a missing person search. I looked and looked until I always end up talking to this woman while crying. She looked as if she has had 2-piece flapper dress thing. It was always gold. She also has blonde hair and knew my name and age each time that I had the dream. For instance, I remember when I was 5. She was saying my name, and when I asked how old I was, she said I was 5. So after this happened, we would walk around for a bit, till she stopped me and asked me if I wanted to see something cool, to which I always said yes. She would then pull out this weird watch-like thing, and she'd tap it, and there would be a portal, almost like when you drop a VR chat portal, though VR chat was nowhere near out by then. So when you walked in, it'd give you options. One would always be my neighbor's house. Next would be to just random places. We usually went to my neighbor's house, he was an old guy and just sat out of nowhere. And just out of nowhere, she'd get attacked by him if we went there. I'd have nowhere to go because for some reason my house wasn't built yet. I'm not sure why this had happened, but it's made me extremely anxious, and I think about it every day. Does anybody have any idea?
I have no idea who the old woman
Jeez.
could be. But I mean, like, the first thought I had was just like it's a fear of being separated from the mother, like seeing as the fact that like that's the only thing that's consistent in how it's recurring, and then like on top of that, various strange things happen following, like losing the mother. But yeah, I don't know who the old woman could be.
And it's kind of like a fear of loss too, because they can't find the house. So now it's like you fear you're lost without a home, without your mother, and then just this random stranger. Just I don't understand the random stranger.
Yeah, can you remember like as a kid being lost in the grocery store or something like that, and then some lady comes up and is like friendly and tries to help you? Have you ever had an experience like that, if you can remember?
Yeah, I've had experiences like that. And the lady was always friendly, and I was always like, my mother's gonna kill me. Yeah.
Did you feel like safe with that lady, or did you feel afraid of her?
I've always felt like I don't like people in general. So it's like to have a stranger like, you need help, little boy? No.
Yeah.
Get away from me. Like even now, if some stranger go up to me, you need help? No, I got this. I can change my own tire. Thanks.
Yeah, I second that. Like even when I know that they have like pure intentions, like I can tell that they have pure intentions. So, like I still felt uncomfortable with the fact that someone was coming in to help me. But in this night, like this person seems to be very comfortable with this. Makes me think, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe this happens a lot. Maybe they get lost a lot, separated from mom.
It's like, I don't know, you're a little too pure intention. Get out of here. I don't trust you.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's weird though. The stranger could be, depending on this person's faith, it could be the manifestation of like a guardian angel. Guardian angel.
True. Yeah. Nightmare number 14. This is a post by a user named NervousAd5549. The post is titled, The Lady in White. The post reads, This nightmare haunted me for several years. I would say 2 or 3. I'm not sure. I was a little girl. Almost every night. It's important to know that I lived in an apartment with my mother and my big brother, who was in a building 50 meters from the church of my village and the old cemetery. It was old buildings of the 70s and 80s. Every night I went to bed and it started. I got up from my bed in the dark without ever lighting the light, but I was afraid of black. I then opened the door of my room, which leads to a long hallway until my stay and the entrance at the bottom of the left. I was still standing in the dark in front of this big hallway, and then I was waiting. I felt like I was waiting for hours. I was terrorized. Suddenly, no noise, only the sound of her heels resonating on the ground, and I saw her at the end of my hallway, arriving from the left, through the entrance. She walked slowly, head down, dressed in white, until standing up right in front of me, turn in front of me, raise my head, and fix me for long minutes. At that moment, no noise, just the beats of my heart that were accelerating. After these long minutes to wait, she started shouting and rushed on me very fast, and she hit and entered my body. I also shouted with all my strength, and then fell instantly to the ground, losing consciousness, and then woke up in my bed. And so, every night. P.S. I remember talking to my mother about it when I was a little bigger, and she told me that every morning she was picking me up in the hallway and then putting me back to bed. But I wonder if this discussion was not actually also a dream. I never managed to talk to her about it. I don't know why.
Oh, someone was renting that body for the night.
Yeah, that one gave me goosebumps. That really freaked me out. I mean, a white lady, or the idea of a white lady, is a very common type of ghost. Like just a lady who wears a white dress and she's like pale. At least, as far as like folklore ghosts. But I mean, it definitely sounds like she was sleepwalking in real life. I actually,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, but that actually is such a freaky thought. Like, if you imagine just waking up, I really felt like even just the first part, the anticipation, where she gets up, she just like walks into the hall and she's just staring at the darkness, waiting. It's 10 times freakier when you realize that she was doing that in real life.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't think of that until you just said it.
Yeah.
Her sleeping body was literally staring into the dark hallway.
And it could be then that also the white lady that she saw was her mother picking her up and putting her to bed, right?
Yeah.
And that's why at the end of the dream she falls asleep and lost consciousness. If I had to bet, I'd say that's what's happening. But of course, like the freakier interpretation is that, she's like actually, making it, into the hallway,
Yeah.
and then a real ghost is like, interacting with her, and then her mom puts her back to bed.
She's gonna rent your body for a day.
Yeah, but most likely the ghost was actually her mother, but we'll never know. And she said that she never managed to talk to her mother about it, but yeah, she can ask if that was also a dream. I suspect it wasn't, though. Like the actual.
Yeah, that's the weird part too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that one before we get into our final nightmare?
I like your angle of like the white lady that she thinks is a ghost was actually just her mother rushing over to pick her up and put her back in bed. But in the dream, it's like this scary thing that's taking her over. Kind of like because in her dream, she's now no longer in control of her body. Just like in real life, if she's sleepwalking, she's not in control of her body.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever known a sleepwalker?
No, I know a couple of people that have night terrors, and like my son has one, and so he'll just stand up randomly and be like, but like,
oh really?
Like still basically asleep, but like no sleepwalkers, and that would just be like, I wouldn't know how to handle it. It's like just like where you going? Like there's people that get in a car and drive while they're sleeping, and like succeed in getting from point A to point B, and it's just weird how that works.
Yeah, I read a story like in my I think episode 8 of Nightmare Theater where there's this case in Canada where a guy got in a car, drove for several kilometers, and then went and murdered his like in-laws while asleep, and he was acquitted.
Yeah. I've heard of that story. That was always, I was like, how? Like if I ever kill somebody, like I was asleep. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, because like their eyes are open, right, and like their brain must be receiving information, but they're actually not conscious.
Sounds like he had his own white lady.
Yeah. Anyway, would you like to read nightmare number 15?
This one by Reddit user Character Street 2490, called Dream Transfer. It says, I'm so shook. I just have to share this because it's so unbelievably strange. I just had a nightmare where I was watching a man on an old television set go downstairs. In that moment, my dream body was standing in front of a staircase, and that man I had seen on the television was coming down before me. The last thing I realized was that his stare catching mine, and in that moment of terror, I woke up. But as I did, the real terrifying thing happened. My dog, Toby, was making the most blood-curdling sound I've ever heard him make. His body was thrashing about beside me. I put my hand on him and tried to speak to him to calm him down. It worked and he fell back to sleep. What are the odds that within the second of the dream man catching my stare, causing me to suddenly wake up, that my dog was having his own nightmare while making such a horrific sound? I'm starting to wonder that my nightmare somehow transferred to him. He always sleeps besides me, by the way.
Oh my god. That's a terrifying thought.
Poor dog.
And like you gotta wonder what happened next in the nightmare.
Yeah, like what did that dog have to go through? Like, you're a selfish owner.
I mean, like, dogs will often mimic your emotions, right, and kind of like throw them back at you. But I don't know if they can do that while they're unconscious, right? Like have a nightmare because you're having nightmares. But it's definitely known that like animals do have nightmares, and like you can see, dogs having nightmares and cats having nightmares and reacting to it, physically, like barking in their sleep sometimes and pretending to run on their side, some things like that. I did an episode about shared nightmares, which is sort of what this poster seems to be implying, that like maybe they the animal in this case, but in some cases it's also the like another person is sharing your nightmare. But I mean, they actually it's kind of interesting, like back in the early 20th century there were psychologists that tried to do like experiments on this, but of course none of the results are ever replicable. So like it's kind of in the realm of pseudoscience, but some people believe that this is, you really are able to see someone else's nightmare, and that this is, maybe the dog was picking up what he was putting down or waking up from.
I mean, it definitely could be. I mean, animals are very perceptive, and like we barely understand human dreams, so how could we hope to understand? I mean, heck, I just found out the other day that they think octopuses dream. Like,
really,
we can't understand our own. How could we possibly hope to understand an animal's dream? And it's crazy, though.
And the other thing, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying how weird that we would have a dream, a story about dream transfer, right after we had just a few stories back where someone was sharing a dream with their sister with just like a different monster.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, like you hear more people report on these sorts of experiences than like you realize. Like a lot of people do seem to have these things. And the other thing that was interesting to me is that really freaked me out is it's almost like a horror movie sequence, how he's watching the man on the camera and suddenly he blinks and he's the one in the line of fire. He's the one who's getting like peered at. And it's like that's one of those things where you hear someone describe that and I almost feel like I've had a nightmare like that before, but I can't remember it. It's one of the sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just like one of those situations where it feels like, like, have I had something like that before? Like, it sounds like I have. Like, it sounds so freaky.
It is. It's got to be freaky. And in the chat, Darth Mater, she's saying that her oldest used to sleepwalk, which, as a parent, it's got to be terrifying.
Yeah.
So she's probably dealt with, like that story where it's like the white lady controlling your body and carrying you back to bed.
Oh yeah, and L in the chat, my cousin would get on his motorbike and rev it up before his family got him in the driveway. Yikes, that could have ended badly. I find the concept of dreams very interesting. I wonder how it works. One day maybe we'll understand them. Yeah, there's a number of theories on why we dream, and a lot of them, especially for nightmares, it's about like evolutionary psychologists think that it has something to do with threat rehearsal. So like if some element of your subconscious thinks that it's picking up on some danger, maybe at work, maybe there's like some like faulty wiring or something that you haven't overtly like noticed in your conscious mind, but your subconscious noticed it might show you your coworker getting electrocuted in a nightmare or something like that. And the idea is that maybe it's your brain's way of trying to show you dangers that you're not even aware of. But yeah, like,
it's crazy.
Anyway, that's about it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for stopping by, and thank you to my guest, Ghost Train / Slaughterhouse Stories. I've linked to his channel in the description. He puts out a ton of videos. He really hustles hard. I recommend you check him out. He does creepypasta readings and other horror stories. Highly recommend his channel. You can feel free to send me a nightmare at theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I would love to read it next week. And then this Thursday, I will have a video out. I believe it will be some new folklore monster that I'll write a story about. It'll maybe be the Cyclops or the Knucklevi, one of those. So look forward to that. Anyway, thanks to everyone again. Any final thoughts, Ghost Train?
No, just thank you for having me on. This was really fun. It was really interesting to talk about nightmares and interpret them and read them. And I hope your channel a lot of success. This has been great.
Thanks, and same to you. And without further ado, until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.